Welcome to the Why Not Today podcast, where we celebrate courage, determination, and the power of saying why not today. I'm your host, Leslie Kane, and each episode we dive into inspiring stories of individuals who have taken bold steps, faced their fears, and embraced the possibility of today. From entrepreneurs to artists, dreamers to doers, we explore the moments when they said, enough waiting, why not today? Join me as we uncover the heartwarming, the audacious, and the transformative. Whether it's pursuing a lifelong passion, overcoming obstacles, or simply choosing joy, our guests share their journeys and inspire us all. I started this podcast in honor of my father, Patrick King, who often said, why not today? And remember, you're just one decision away from changing your life. And my guest today, which I didn't realize when I met her, is kind of a rock star and done all kinds of cool stuff. But it is Miss Sam Horn, and she was on the at an event I went to about a month ago. She was a keynote speaker. And from the minute you opened up your mouth, Sam started talking. I'm like, she's my people. I need to know her. So as you started, and I don't know if you said something before this, but the first thing I heard was, I used to live in Reston and walked around Lake Ann every day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's my person. I do that every day. How we'd never crossed paths before, I have no idea. And then gotten to know you a little bit more and all the connections, and it's just so much fun to see how we're so connected. And I wish you still lived locally, but we're going to connect and get together, and virtual still works. And and your love of water and your trip around, I mean, just so many connections, like so many cool things. So I'm excited to have you here. And so, Sam, why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit about you and a fun fact, and then we'll get into your courage journey.
Okay, how about a 2-minute backstory and a fun fact? So,
That works.
I grew up on a horse in Southern California, and a reporter asked me a couple years ago where I got my confidence. Well, I got it on the back of a horse because even when I was 8 and my sister was 9, we'd be gone all day on our horses. And our
Wow.
parents didn't warn us. They didn't say, be careful. They figured that if we got bucked off, we'd figure it out.
Right.
Bridle breaks, figure it out. And so both my sister and I see the world as an adventurous place, not a dangerous place. And that's where we got our courage from. And I have the pleasure of having a trifecta business. I coach, I write, I speak. When I coach, I work with clients like Sherry Salata, who is Oprah's executive producer, Terry Jones, founder of Travelocity, Larry Lynch, director of Disney Institute. I help them figure out their next. When I write, it's books like Tongue Fu that have been selling around the world for more than 20 years, and Pop, which Seth Godin gave a cover endorsement to. The latest one is Talking on Eggshells. And then when I write, and I've talked about speaking and coaching, and when I speak, it's for clients like NASA and Richard Branson's New Now Leaders and TED Fellows and Accenture and Oracle. A fun fact about me is that what do you think we did, Leslie, when my sister and I had our 4-H sheep in showmanship at the Santa Maria County Fair? How did we keep them quiet in those showmanship classes?
No idea.
We gave them gum.
Oh, okay.
So
That's a
there they
fun
are
fact.
working on their gum. And
That is so much fun. So, well, I did, as I said, I didn't know how much of a rock star you were. And as my dad always taught me, ask. The worst thing people can say is no. And so I'm so grateful that you said yes and in joining us here today. And it sounds like you've done some really cool things and connected to a lot of amazing people. So I always, or let's start with, what does courage mean to you? What is your definition of courage?
Courage to me is acting with agency. In fact, that's the book I'm working on right now about agency. And I think agency is taking the initiative to improve what happens to us, by us, and around us. And notice the verb isn't control. We cannot control what happens to us around us. We can improve it. Therein lies our courage. Therein lies our agency. And therein lies our destiny.
So true. Um, yeah, and I can't wait to see this new book. So I have been reading the Get People's Attention book.
Got your
And
attention? Here.
yep, I listened to it while walking around the lake, and I can say I love listening to you speak, that you're just so intentional and soft. And I can tell you exactly where I was in a lot of the places around the lake when I was listening to your book. I haven't started reading it because I want to be able to spend time to put some things in practice, but so much great wisdom. and it sounds like you've had a journey.
In fact, since your podcast is about don't wait, why not today? You're right. We'll talk about the someday is not a day in the week book because both of
Yeah.
us really share this philosophy. In fact, Rene Ricard said, "Tomorrow is another day, but so was yesterday." And we
Mhm.
both agree. And John Legend said, "The future is already here, and we are already late." And that's why we choose to initiate instead of wait.
Yeah, someday. I mean, we have to do it now and not wait. Um, yeah, it's funny when my dad, he has passed away, but when he was alive, people would ask him how are you? And he's like, I'm on this side of the grass. I'm alive today. And I think we need to take it one day at a time. And it's interesting, you shared at your keynote about someday, and I'd love for you to share your story about when you're in California. And but then it was interesting, you shared the story about being in California talking to your son and decided to take some time and enjoy life. And so you shared it then. I heard it on a pod or on your book that I was listening to. And then I was just randomly grabbed a book that I've read before and picked up to read again the other day. And I'm just in bed reading the book and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like 2 pages on Sam Horn. I know her now. So it was just such a cool coincidence. So in your journey, writing books and all the amazing things you've done, were there pivotal why not today moments, as I said? You remember exactly where you were, what you're doing that totally changed the trajectory of your life.
What a wonderful question, Leslie. And I'll always be grateful to my dad because when I was about to go to college, all my teachers were saying, "Sam, you've got to be a lawyer or a doctor to use your brain." Well, I'd grown up as an athlete, played a lot of tennis, and I wanted to study recreation administration. And a career counselor told me that was a joke, a slacker career, and that I should be more rigorous. Well, my dad gave me Goethe's quote, W.H. Murray's quote about boldness has genius in it, and that when we are vacillating, that the universe cannot help us, and that as soon as we make a decision, providence then comes in and creates things that are better than we could imagine. And he said, "Sam, whenever you're at a crossroads and you can't decide what to do, pick the bolder of the options." So,
Mhm.
Leslie, I went with my gut and my heart, and I went for what I wanted, what lit me up. And my whole life has unfolded from that decision. After college, the week after college, I was recruited to Sea Pines Plantation back on Hilton Head Island. I ended up working with Rod Laver. I was recruited by World Championship Tennis to come up to McLean, Virginia, open up the Regency Racket Club, the first country club for racket sports, got to play tennis at the White House and so forth. And my whole
Wow.
life can be traced back to that pivotal decision. Instead of doing what I was being told to do, what I ought to do, what I should do, no, what lights me up, what's aligned with what I want. And as you say, the rest is history. And I'm very grateful for picking the bolder of the options.
What great advice. And, yeah, we need to do the things and not listen to all the voices. I was just at a meeting earlier and somebody said she wanted to be in the Peace Corps and her mom told her no, she couldn't,
Ooh,
and told her all the reasons why, and she didn't.
oh,
Um, yeah.
boy. As you know, in the Someday book, I talk about those regrets. Is that when we do not listen to that inner voice that's trying to help us out, our instincts have our best interest at heart. And the old parable about the boats and the helicopters, the one I'm talking
Mhm.
about? It's in case people haven't heard it, 60 seconds. It's like there's a flood and the water is rising, and a man climbs up on his roof and he prays to God to come help save him. And a helicopter comes and puts down a rope ladder, and he says, "Oh, no, 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 God's coming to save me." And here comes a boat, get in. "No, no, 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 God's coming to save me." And he drowns. And he gets to heaven and he's so upset. He says, "God, I pleaded, I begged for you to come save me." And God says, "I sent you a helicopter, I sent you a boat." So if we pay attention, our instincts will alert us to something that resonates, something that's congruent, something that calls us. It's a boat and a helicopter. And if we act on it, I think we meet our best future halfway.
Oh, absolutely. And I always try to coach people and encourage people like that thing that wakes you up at the night, that thing you just can't let go of. Like you just, why not today? Just act and take that one step because we don't know um, what's going to happen. And I love talking about regret. And I know I think Daniel Pink had endorsed your book, or there's some connection. That's
Mhm.
my like super duper star. That if you have any introductions, I would love to have him on my podcast. When I started the podcast, his book had just come out on regrets. And I have quoted that many times. Like, we never regret what we did, we regret what we didn't do.
That's right.
And then he actually started a movement. I don't know if you've seen this he's doing something in conjunction with the Washington Post
Mm.
called Why Not?
Wow.
And asking big questions like, why not pay teachers over $100,000? Why
Wow.
not get rid of left turns? Like big questions he's asking. So when he announced that in the last year, people are like, all right, that's the person you need to talk to. I'm like, yes, it is.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's get
Wow.
back to you though. So your someday story, and I love the story, and I could almost quote it verbatim, but talk about the pivotal why not today moment in California with your conversation with your son.
Thank you for asking, Leslie. And I've thanked my son many times for this. So I just finished a very intense 2-day consult in Southern California. And I'm sitting in my rental car and the phone rings. It's Andrew. And he sensed something in my voice. And he said, "What's up, Mom?" And I said, "Andrew, I'm so exhausted. I don't know how I'm going to get on that plane. I fly back to DC, then I fly back to San Francisco in a couple days for a keynote." And he paused for a moment and then he said, "There's something about you I don't understand." He said, "You have your own business. You can do anything you want, and you're not taking advantage of it." Out of the mouths of 20 somethings.
Mhm.
And so as a result of that, he said, "Mom," he said, "why don't you play hooky for a day?" And now, Leslie, I know many people who listen to your podcast are business owners. They're, maybe raising a family and working a full-time job. It's hooky. When was the last time you played hooky?
Yeah,
How irresponsible, right?
right.
However, he said, "Mom, you can stay there, you can work from there, and then you can just fly up to San Francisco in a couple of days." And he booked me into the Laguna Beach Hotel. And an hour later, instead of exhausted and getting on a red eye going back to DC, I am sleeping in the Laguna Beach Hotel with the window open and the sound of the surf. And I woke up that next morning and we get up and get going, right? I mean, we got things to do. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't have to get up and get going. And I pulled up the covers and I plumped up the pillow and I went back to sleep. And I just set out exploring later on that day. And that was when was born The Year by the Water. And I had, like many people who listen to your podcast, I had been a single mom. I'd been working 7 days a week in order to make enough money to send my kids through college without college debt. And I'd been taking care of everybody else but myself. And I'd been putting everyone else first but myself. And I thought it was my time to put myself as lead in my own story. I gave away 95% of what I owned. And then I headed out and I sailed the Chesapeake Bay and I went to Monet's Garden, took a photography workshop from DeWitt Jones at Monet's Garden, and swam with Zach the dolphin. And I interviewed people and I said, "Are you happy? And if so, why? And if not, why not?" And I will always remember a young man in his 30s, and he and his wife had two kids with special needs. And when I said, "What's your dream?" He thought about it for a moment. He said, "I don't dream anymore. It's too painful."
Ah,
And so many people talked about what they wanted to do, but they were going to do it when they retired or when the kids went off to school or when they weren't so busy. And we come back to Dan Pink, Leslie. Those are regrets waiting to happen. And that's
yeah,
why I wrote that book, Someday is Not a Day in the Week.
so true. And it just breaks my heart that the people that are just so miserable. I was on a call the other day, and it was a lot of people that work for the government, and they actually have clocks you can buy that are countdown clocks till when you get to retire. Isn't that sad? And I met some girl one day who had just started working and she hated her job. I'm like, oh, get another job. And she goes, you're not supposed to like your job. That's what her parents had taught her.
I've got to write that down.
Isn't
You're
that, it
not
just broke
supposed
my heart. And her parents worked. People work to retire. And how many times have you heard the story of you retire and then you or a spouse has illness or something? I talked to somebody that worked in HR and she said at least once a year, somebody retired. And within that first year, they had a heart attack and died. It's
you
just
know
like, we gotta
that
live our
in
life.
Leslie, there that statistic is in the Someday book, because actually, and part of the intro is about my father, and the TEDx talk that I gave on Someday was my dad worked for the State Department of Agriculture in California. He was in charge of vocational ag education. He just so loved his students, his FFA students, the teachers. He drove around that state. I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of times, going to all the county fairs, the state fair, going to their farms, their ranches, going to the judging contest and so forth. And his dream was that when, gosh, I'm going to get emotional, Leslie, he was going to go see the national parks. When he retired, he wanted to go see, you know, Zion. He wanted to see, the Rocky Mountain and so forth. And when he retired, he took off, and a week later, he had a stroke in a hotel bathroom.
Mm,
And he recovered, but he never got to see those national parks,
right.
Leslie.
Oh,
And you're doing God's work here with your podcast. Is that what I found is that people think they're being responsible, that doing something we love is fun. It's fun, but it's frivolous. It's indulgent. I mean, I have bills to pay. I have a
right.
family to take care of, and we think we're doing the right thing. Here's the thing, though. What are we modeling for our kids? That we're not supposed to like our job, that we're
Right.
supposed to work 7 days a week, that we're not supposed to do something that lights us up, that's fun, that it's bad, it's something to be ashamed of almost, that you put it off and then, a week later you get a stroke. And so I hope what you're doing with your podcast is you're saying how precious life is, and we can be responsible and we can love our life. And that's what we want to
Mhm.
model. That's what we're
Right.
supposed to be doing, is to have the best of both worlds instead of seeing one as I'll do it someday.
Right. And it's so true. And we need to enjoy the life and do what gives us joy. There's so many similarities in your journey and mine and things you said. It's funny. And I think I mentioned this when we talked, but I did a couple times what I called my toes in the sand tour. Did I tell you that? That like I love the beach. And so, but I can work just like you, work 24/7 and work to exhaustion. And so I try every month to take a week off, or not a week off, take time off to go to the beach or the lake.
Yeah.
Recently, because I'm doing two business, I'm a little busy. So I jumped in the car and drove an hour outside of Northern Virginia to meet somebody for lunch. Just, I'm like, okay, I need a break. I need to fill my cup. And we need
You know,
to do those
is
things.
isn't it, Paulo Coelho said one day we're going to wake up and there won't be any time left to do the things we've always wanted to do. And once again, as you say, there's people who listen, who work in the government, have full-time job, have kids they're raising, and they really think it's selfish, once again, to do something that to take an hour to go to lunch, like I don't have time to do that. Well, the thing is that if we do that, it doesn't it give us energy that
Oh,
makes us
absolutely.
enjoy our life? It's like
Mhm.
it's such a win. And I really am a woman on a mission to stop using the word take time off work,
Mm,
because Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that caused it. And I think we can't solve a problem with the same language that caused it. And as you may know, 57% of people do not take their full paid 2-week vacation. Let's
mm,
look at that again. 2 weeks a year, they get to do what they want, and they don't even take their full 2 weeks paid vacation because their employees are counting on them, or they've got to finish this project. And that is going down the rabbit hole of poor health. And
mm.
so we are not taking time off work, we're taking time on life.
Oh,
And
I
I
like
was,
that.
isn't it?
I
It
was
was,
gonna
I was
ask, what's
thinking
the opposite? Take time
on
on.
life. And there was a gentleman at EO, and I speak a lot for entrepreneurs organizations. So I'm speaking in Portland. And as a result of doing the someday talk and doing our 4 square box where we figure out what we're not doing that we want to and what we're doing that we don't want to, and then we change it, he realized that he has a 15-year-old daughter who's on swim team and he's a founder. So it's very easy for him to get consumed by his business. Monday through Friday, after our talk, he started taking time off at 3 o'clock. He drives to the high school and he drives his daughter to swim practice. It takes about a half an hour, but he already knows that that half hour with his 15-year-old daughter, when he is at the end of his life and he is looking back at the things that he did that felt so right, that he will always be glad he did. He said, she's 15. How much longer is she going to want to talk to me? It's like,
Not much.
spend time with me, have side by side conversations without interruptions. He said it is a treasure in his life that he takes a half an hour to drive his 15-year-old daughter to swim practice Monday through Friday.
That's amazing. And, my dad always owned his own business my whole life. And he was there for all of our activities. Yes, after work, after dinner, he would go in his office, which was at the house or down at the other end of the lake, and would do work. But he coached our soccer team and he went to our everything. And it was kind of a pain having a dad as your coach because you couldn't play from. But he was very active and a part of it, and a part of our friends' lives. That people would come over and they would come to go do something with one of us kids, and he's like, grab that mulch, Sam, and mulch, and they do it. I'm like, what are you doing? But when he passed away, people said they had more conversation with my dad than they ever had their own father. Yeah.
Wow.
But so I want to go back to that work thing
Yeah.
because that's such a bad word that people talk about, and it's got such a bad connotation. And I think there's a difference too between owning your own business, which I'm so grateful that I started a Mary Kay business 30 years ago and quit my job 25 years ago, that I've had that flexibility and it doesn't seem like work. And I've got no people that work like 9 to 5s or a teacher, they work in the school system. And then they're like, what are you doing this weekend? I'm like, oh, I got some work to do. And they're like, oh, you got to work. Are you done working? I'm like, you're never done. But I could, yeah, I might work on a Saturday, but I'm taking Tuesday off. You
You
could
know,
design
Catherine
it.
Graham of the Washington Post said, to do what you love and feel that it matters, how could anything be more fun? And the only thing that's more fun is to do what we love and feel that it matters and get to do it with people we enjoy and respect and get paid for it. And
Yes,
so what
exactly.
what what about that is work, right? It's a
Hmm.
privilege. It's a joy. It
Yeah,
is every single day we wake up and we look forward to the people we get to connect with. We look forward to the autonomy that we have and the creativity we have and the opportunity on a daily basis to make a difference. So let's redefine that. That is, in fact, Richard Branson says, I do not see a difference between work and play. It's all the same thing. And I think that's a very healthy attitude.
absolutely. So with all your books, with all your knowledge, what other advice, courage, or there are other parts of your journey that you think the listeners would benefit from? More why not today moments or
Mhm. I get to tell, you and I are both storytellers. And so I get to tell a story first, and we both love quotes. So my favorite Peanuts cartoon strip is Lucy says, you know, I wonder if anyone really changes. And Charlie Brown's kind of offended. And he says, I've changed a lot this last year. And she says, I mean, for the better. So, part of agency, the book I'm working on right now, and it has a lot to do with courage, and that's the courage to improve what's happening to us around us. We don't wait for someone else. Well, it's their fault, or no, they should go first. No, no, no. We go first. And here's one of my favorite stories. We're going into Thanksgiving, and a year ago, my son Tom and his family and I visited my sister Sherry in California. Now, Sherry's been running my business for 25 years, and her daughter works in her business with her. So, around the dining room table, we were just talking about looking forward to the new year. And Christy, her daughter, said, "Well, I would like to buy a ranch and rescue draft horses." Well, we decided to jump on Zillow. And how much is it? Well, you're not going
Mhm.
to get a ranch in California. Well, how about
Right.
Texas? They live in Texas. So, and we had a wonderful conversation. And I thought that was that. Well, that was not that. I get a call from Sherry in January. She says, "We did it." And I said, "You did what?" She said, "We bought a ranch in Texas. We're moving March 15th." I said,
Wow.
"Sherry, that's 6 weeks away." She said, "I know." And now, if it's not on the calendar, it's not getting done. If it's not on the calendar, it's not getting done. Since they were moving March 15th, now you can reverse engineer it, right? Okay, what
Right.
are they going to do with their home? Well, one of their employees will live in their home and run their California business, and they can open up. Okay, solve that. What are they going to take with them? Well, they can only take so much. And so they have a horse trailer, what they can fit in their horse trailer and their van, and they drive across. Now, I've lived on a ranch. Things go wrong on a ranch. The day after they got to the ranch, and my sister and brother-in-law have lived in California all their life. They had never even been to Texas
Oh,
or
wow.
seen this ranch. The day after they get there, the plumbing goes out. They're out in the middle of nowhere. Can they find a plumber? No. Does Christy go online and study YouTube videos and figure out how to fix it herself? Yes. It's like a week later, big thunderstorm, tree comes crashing down, just misses their house, blocks the road. Do they have a chainsaw? No. Does their neighbor come over with a chainsaw and help them cut up that tree and haul it away? And when she finds out that they're rescuing these draft horses who are in kill shelters after working hard all their life, does she offer to rent her 14 acres to them for $60 a year? Yes. They
Wow.
sponsored the local rodeo. They're involved in the Chamber of Commerce. Sherry, Joe, and Christy have changed their life more in 3 months than most people have in 30 years.
Their whole life.
Yeah. And it is, we're coming to the end of 2024, Leslie, and I hope everyone in alignment with what we're saying. What is one thing they can do themselves or with a loved one or their families this year, 2024, so that when they look back, they will, 2024 is the year we finally went to Hawaii after talking about it for 20 years.
Yeah, we need
2024 is the year that we started having family dinner once a week. 2024 is the year that I finally started the book I've been talking about. 2024 is the year I got into pickleball. My friends were enjoying it. I thought 2024 is the year that I started walking around the lake every morning. What is something that we could do this year? Put a date on the calendar so that when we look back, we will always know that we took agency over our life instead of waiting for someday.
And how often do we think, oh, I'll start that in 2025, which I
Mhm.
was guilty of last year. I wanted to start Why Not Today as an LLC. You know when I started it?
Tell me.
January 1st of 2024. But, we got to do the things, yeah, in the bucket list. I interviewed my guest that was on the last week was Marissa Levin.
Yes.
And she shared after the podcast, she did a post and she talked about her LBL. You know what that is?
Tell me.
Local bucket list.
Wow.
So I've often talked about bucket lists, and I had a very interesting guest. Her name is Laura Carney, and I saw her on CBS Morning, Sunday morning. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. Her dad was killed by a distracted driver.
Wow.
At 54. Several years later, her brother found her dad's bucket list. And she found that she did the bucket list and wrote a book called My Father's List. Yeah, so she does dares with different organizations on doing your bucket list. So I'm very much about, okay, we got to do those things. But the other thing I do is a holiday bucket list. Like December 1st, to be intentional every day in December
Yeah.
about doing something to enjoy the holidays. And it doesn't have to be big. Like, Reston, and Reston Town Center is absolutely beautiful, but how we get so busy and you just drive by to run in to grab something, you don't stop and look at the lights, look at the ice skating, so maybe see a holiday movie or go get a Starbucks hot chocolate or go drive around and look at Christmas lights, which I always did with my nieces and nephews when they were little. We'd just get in the car and go look at Christmas lights. But we need to be intentional and enjoy our life. And talking about the deadline and having a date on the calendar, somebody said this the other day and this stuck. I don't procrastinate. I'm deadline oriented. So if I do something tomorrow, or next week,
Uh-huh.
and probably some of the very productive times of my business is when I did move because I had a deadline and I had to get stuff done and work around it.
Yeah. Judy Tenuta, the comedian, says, my parents always told me I wouldn't amount to much because I procrastinated so much. I told them, just you wait.
Right.
So, Leslie, we're in agreement. And I hope that I just had an opportunity 2 weeks ago to speak at Conscious Capitalism, this week to speak at Joe Polish Genius Network. And I actually asked people to get their phones out in the session because it's like, okay, you may be agreeing with this in theory. And then we know what happens. You go home from this conference, you get busy, and they don't call them fleeting thoughts for nothing, right?
No.
So get out your phone right now. What is something that you've been putting off? What is something you've been promising yourself you'll do someday? And I will always remember a gentleman, we had filled out the 4 box. And by the way, Leslie, if you want, I can send that to you and then you can put it on your podcast page or
Oh,
something
that would
like
be
that.
great.
Good. So they can fill out this happiness box that helps them identify what they're delaying and how they can put it on the calendar. And a gentleman in the session said that what he was not doing that he wanted to is that his oldest son was going off to college. And he knew that if they were ever going to take that family vacation that they'd been talking about for all those years, it had to be that summer. In the session, he emailed a company, a bareboat charter place in the Bahamas, and found out how much it would cost and so forth. And like, he's a busy founder. He doesn't have time to take a week off, 2 weeks off. He booked a whole month. And
Wow.
and by the Monday following the program, he and his family were going to go bareboat chartering with a sailboat down in the Bahamas together. And he emailed me and he said, I already know that when I am on my deathbed and when I am looking back at my life, that one of the best things I ever will have done was to spend that month with my family in the Bahamas, sailing, doing
I just
something
got
we love.
chills. How amazing. Um, you keep and I always at the end talk about how it relates to my dad, but you keep hitting things that he's done. And I didn't appreciate it at the time, but when I was 16 years old, my parents bought a camper and we went on a family road trip for 5 weeks. I used to know how many days, hours, and minutes because I was 16 years old. And so the last place I wanted to be was with my family. And at that point, there was 5 of us kids, and the youngest, Catherine, was 5 weeks old. The fact that they did that and the crazy adventures and stories, but looking back, like what a blessing that he took 5 weeks. Now, he had his own business, and we would drive for till the afternoon. We'd pick a place that had a pool as kids to play, and he would get on the payphone and work and make phone calls and do work. And then as on the trip, he stopped places and did work here and there as well. But to be able to have that blessing and looking back of what a gift he gave us to be able to spend that time.
Isn't it? I saw a study one time that asked people for their favorite childhood memories, and number one was that their parents read to them. They had story time or they read books every night. That was number one, and number two was family vacation. And it's very interesting because people often said, you know what? When I think back, I hated that vacation. We were bickering in the car. It's like we were complaining how much farther. So when they remembered the actual event, it felt like that they had sibling rivalry and all that. but when they look back, they cherish it. And my
Yeah.
friend Mary Loverty, who's a Hall of Fame speaker, Oprah favorite, she came up with a great, well, she tells a great story about this, is that they used to drive every summer to their favorite lake. They would pull their water ski boat and they would spend 2 weeks at that lake, and they all loved to water ski. Well, going there, everyone was excited and full of like enthusiasm and so forth. On the way home, they were all hot and sunburned, and spent
Hmm.
a week together, and they'd be bickering in the back seat. So she came up with the best game. And the best game is it's like best meal, best friend, best laugh, best memory, etc. And so you come up with a category and then you share, and then you go around the car or go around the table. And I'm part of a mastermind with Mary. And every time after our mastermind, our final meal, we go around best insight, best action we're going to take. And so if people maybe we're coming into Thanksgiving or a holiday dinner, why not play the best game at dinner? Why not go around the table? So we're wrapping up this year. What's the best new friend you made this year? What's the most fun, the best fun day you've had? What's the best thing you've learned? What's the best change you've made? And you can have really meaningful conversations where everyone participates and make memories.
Oh, I love that idea. I always ask people when we've gone to events or done something with family or friends or work things. I always ask people, what was your favorite part? And people are like, oh, here it comes. I'm like, yeah, I want to know your favorite. But I host a luncheon and I always have people introduce themselves, not with their elevator speech, but a question.
Mm,
And so I think the question that we're going to play the best game next week.
good. Is it or the favorite game, right? And
Yeah.
it's like
What's
it's
your
it
favorite part
is
of this year or your best thing? Or I may have them pull out their phone and write down the thing they're going to do before the end of the year.
Leslie, I think we share. I'm a real ambassador and proponent of one table conversations. It is, I'll always remember. Do you remember Bottom Line Personal by any chance, or Boardroom Reports? This
Mm-mm.
was really the first physical blog. A guy named Marty Edelman years ago would put together a newsletter that had, the latest trend from brain surgery, the latest trend in fitness, the latest trend, and Tung Fu was featured in it. So I got this embossed invitation to come to New York to go to the Four Seasons restaurant, and it coincided with the book tour. So I lived in Maui at the time. I went to New York. Here are 25 of the most fascinating people I've ever met in my life who had all been featured in Bottom Line Personal. And Marty sat at the end of the table, and he would ring a little bell and he would point to you, and you had 2 minutes to talk about what was going on in your industry, or the most important trend, or something people need to know that's coming along the pipe in this profession or whatever. And I promised myself if I ever had an opportunity to do that, I would. So when I lived in Washington, D.C., I put on salons at the National Press Club, and they were often tied in with book launches for clients of mine. So we would have someone come in and do a book launch, and then we would go around the room, and each person would share like a 1 minute epiphany, from that conversation or from that book or on that topic. And almost every single person came up to me afterwards or would email me and say, that is the most fascinating evening I've had in years.
Wow.
And it was because instead of talking about the traffic or the Reds, we don't call them Redskins anymore, the Commanders,
Yeah.
or the traffic, or our salad, we were talking about things that mattered, and everyone had a voice, everyone contributed. I just think we're so hungry for that kind of meaningful conversation and connection.
And so many people are lonely. I spoke at a group last night, and it's called the Yay Sayers group.
Wow.
And these two
What?
women thought we need to gather women and talk and have really conversations. So they started it, they threw it on Facebook, not knowing if anybody would reply, and 100 and some people immediately said they wanted to come. So they've been doing it for 7 years. And she said sometimes there's two people, sometimes I think we had probably close to 20 last night. But I talked about courage. But it's not I mean, they have speakers, they have a subject, but it wasn't me just talking to them. We talked about courage. We talked about those vulnerable things. What's that one thing you're afraid to do? And so it's just so powerful. And then I listened to a Simon Sinek podcast episode this morning, and he was talking about friends and friendship. And we need to be intentional with our friends and not like, oh, I'll do it later, or they'll still be there.
Boy, that's a regret waiting to happen, isn't it?
Oh
It's
my
in
God, so
alignment
much
with
so.
what we've said, is that um, one of the books I wrote is What's Holding You Back. And it talked a lot about how many people think, well, I'm shy now, but when I get to be an adult, I will never again worry about what to say. I'll never again be self-conscious. They thought confidence came with being an adult. And boy, were they surprised when
Yeah.
people in their 50s and 60s still feel awkward walking into a room, uncomfortable trying to meet someone for the first time. And so that book has a lot of like how we can walk into any room, anytime, meet anyone, and actually have a meaningful conversation. And one person told me, well, here's a 60-second story, is that I used to do confidence workshops in Hawaii, and we would meet over 3 Saturdays, and we had homework. And after the first Saturday, you were supposed to introduce yourself to someone you wanted to meet. And so this guy named Tony came in grinning from ear to ear. And Tony was an engineer out at Pearl Harbor. And he said, put me in front of a blueprint. I'm in my element. Put me in front of an attractive young lady. All of a sudden, I'm tongue tied, tongue twisted. I don't know what to say. And he said, but I had an excuse because of your assignment. He said, so 3 times a week after work, I go to Alamana Beach Park and I always run twice around the park clockwise. He said, for the last couple of months, there's been a very attractive young lady who runs counterclockwise. And he said, I've always wanted to meet her, but then this critic that lives on my shoulder would say, nah, she's not interested in you. She wanted to run with somebody she already would be. I never had the courage to say anything. He said, but Monday, I have your assignment. So here she comes. I say hi. She says hi back. Wednesday, running along. Here she comes. I say, nice evening, isn't it? She said, sure is. Said, Friday, I'm running along. Here she comes. I said, mind if I run with you? She said, I thought you'd never ask.
Wow.
After we finished, we agreed to meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday and run around the park. He said, Sam, if I hadn't initiated, do you know what I realized? I'd still be running one way. She'd still be running the other way.
Mhm.
Friendships, Shakespeare said, many a friendship is lost for lack of speaking.
Yeah. Oh, we could go on and on and on forever and ever. Um, but I guess we need to wrap it up soon. So how would you encourage somebody else to say, why not today? To do the thing that scares them. How would
Hmm.
you encourage somebody?
I guess I'd quote Michael Altshuler. He said, bad news, time flies.
Mhm.
Good news, you're the pilot.
Mhm.
Right? Is
So
to
true.
is to ask yourself, you brought up procrastination. What is something you want to do? You wanted to, maybe you've been hearing about pickleball. You'd love to play pickleball. Maybe you've been thinking, I really should get a walking buddy. Maybe you've been thinking, I've got a friend I haven't seen in months. I'm going to call her up and meet her halfway. So, what is something that you want to do? And for whatever reason, you've been telling yourself you just don't have the time, is to get out the phone right now and text that person, ask, when can we get together for lunch in the next couple of weeks? Call that person you want to walk with and say, you want to meet like twice a week, walk around the lake. So what is something you want to do? And I tell you, Leslie, we think we have to know to go. We think that clarity follows, that if I don't have my ducks in a row, I can't go, right? No, 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 it's the opposite. We got to go to know. So just pick a friend or something you want to do, course you want to take, class you want to sign up for, someone you want to meet, pick up the phone, text them and ask, when can we do that within the next couple of weeks? And if you put it on the phone, the action will give you the clarity and the confidence and the results. And we will always, always be glad we did.
Amen, sister. So true. And I'm gonna think about that thing that I keep putting off. I did that thing that's been on my to-do list work-wise this week, and it took me 5 minutes. I've been putting it on a list for 9 months, but so many great tidbits. So I always, as I said, try to tie back to my dad, and you may have known him. I don't know if we've talked about it, but he had an eye patch and a handlebar mustache.
And did he hang out Reston Town Center?
No,
Oh, no.
like, I
Okay.
mean, he did sometimes. It
Or
was
Lake
funny when we were
Ann?
kids, we would, if not kids, but when we were out of college, if you'd be in a bar sometimes, all of a sudden he's walking in the door. I'm like, what are you doing here? No way. But yeah, we lived on the other end of Lake Ann. So I don't know what years you lived in Reston.
Mhm.
But he had a handlebar mustache and an eye patch. He was very, very distinguished and people knew who he was. But he grew
Mhm.
up in Southern California. So
Oh,
that's definitely a connection, and San Fernando Valley. What else did you say? Obviously, he owned his own business. He did have a stroke in 2000.
mhm.
Pretty devastating, but he bounced back and he worked until the day he died. Like literally, he's on the phone with people the day he died. Although he couldn't
Wow.
do the same capacity. Enjoy your life. And then Hawaii was a mutual connection. He actually worked in Hawaii a lot. He did worked on military housing. He's a planner, so he spent lots of time in Hawaii.
Wow.
And then the one thing you said is ask. He was a definite proponent of. You never know. No, you never know unless you ask. And if they say no, that's okay. But you didn't ask, you'll never get a yes.
Mhm.
So
Agreed. Agreed.
yes. So I love this conversation. I wish we could go on and on. We're just gonna have to have you back. When's your new book coming out? Do you have a
It'll
date?
come out fall of next year.
Okay, we'll definitely have you on for that. And I'll find other excuses. And hopefully you'll
Good.
come to the DC area or I'll come to Texas. Where are you in Texas?
I live on a stream trail in Lakeway, Texas, right outside of Austin. And
Okay.
by the way, Leslie, I really hope people connect with me on LinkedIn because I believe our life is our lab. And if I have an experience or get an idea, I write about it. And it's just so nice to have that conversation on LinkedIn. And if people want updates on the book, I share some of my favorite stories about that there too.
Okay. And that was my next question. Where's the best way to connect? So I will share all your contact information. And then, yeah, I'll have to start following you on LinkedIn. I've been following your Facebook, but I need to follow LinkedIn as well.
I will
So
look forward to it.
thank you for this amazing conversation. I'm honored to have you as a guest and so much fun. And for the listeners, follow Sam on LinkedIn and all the other places. I'm going to get all your books and start reading or listening to them when I walk around the lake. And thank you everybody for joining this podcast episode. It's been an inspiring journey to hear all about Sam. Remember, every day is an opportunity to take an action, chase your dreams, and make a difference. So why not today? And make sure you subscribe, share, rate the podcast, and you can find out everything you want about the Why Not Today podcast at whynottodaypodcast.com. And until then, stay motivated, keep making things happen, and remember, say why not today. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Leslie. Hope people found it interesting and inspiring.
I'm sure they did.